Welcome to our second installment of the Unified Podcast, where we go behind the scenes with local pastors to better understand what's happening in the Kelowna area churches, how our various expressions have emerged, and where we're going next. Today we're meeting with a man who holds a doctorate in pastoral ministry, is a husband to Teresa, a proud father of 4, and moved to West Kelowna in 1996 to start from scratch Sunridge Church. Pastor Mike has an amazing heart for the local expression of the church, specifically new pastors and church plants. Thank you, Pastor Mike, and we hope that you're so encouraged by everything that we get to share in this message today. We pray that you would share this, you'd be encouraged, and spend some time reflecting on what's happening locally. So welcome, we're here today with Pastor Mike from Sunridge. We're at Sunridge Church today. I'm just going to take a couple minutes talking to you, and just want to say first and foremost, thank you so much for just you being you. We were just talking, that big huggy guy, you and Pastor Roger, very early on, kind of grabbed Lesia and I and brought us into the West Kelowna community, which is huge. We had a big concern as to what that was going to look like, and planting a church in a city that had 20 churches and not a whole lot of people. But yeah, you guys have been amazing, and we're just glad that we can kind of hang out in front of the camera and let people into conversations that we've had. And I just love to take a moment and kind of share some of the stuff that you've been sharing with us and kind of stir that out of you so that your people can hear that and everybody else. So,
well, first let me just say, even before you and Lesia moved here, Teresa and I, we've been praying for people like you, people that have a heart for Jesus, have a heart for the bride, and that you would come to our city. And whether if the number's 20, I don't know what it is. I do know this, that I'm continuing to pray for more Ryan and Lesia's, and that would be something that our city would welcome, especially the churches. So it's an answer to prayer to have you guys here leading.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember coming up and I was just kind of wrestling through that because I came from a church, in a giant city without a whole lot of churches. And one of my friends was like, "Is everybody in Kelowna, following the Lord?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "All right, so we need more churches." I'm like, "All right, that's simple enough." Okay, yeah. So it's been great. So how did you end up here? You're the seasoned minister, church planter of the area. So what did that story look like?
So, electrician for 14 years, Abbotsford, Vancouver area, born and raised. God got a hold of my heart, and that was a beautiful thing as well. Early 20s, just kind of a mess. But mid 20s, there was something that really grabbed my heart, and it was after that, actually. After he grabbed my heart, then he grabbed my heart for the bride, for the church, because I never really thought much of it. And so there was a whole transition that took place, moved me out of the trade of electrical, which, by the way, I loved. But there was just something about, I don't know, I had a lot of lost buddies, and I just kind of thought, boy, what did it take to grab my heart? What's it going to take to grab their heart? And what's the way that seems to happen is through the church. And there was something that began to ignite in me. And before I knew it, I was moved into a whole realm of thinking maybe ministry is what I should be heading toward. We did a few years of a role as an associate pastor in the Abbotsford, Vancouver area. But then we were invited to start this church in an area that I think is quite beautiful. We vacationed here as kids, but I really resisted it. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe because it was a little small, I was kind of used to more of the Vancouver vibe. But God really just broke my heart for it with one drive through a neighborhood as we were invited to consider this area by some church leaders that we respected, and they loved us. And so just even seeing the city, feeling the city, the city at that time was considerably smaller. In fact, we weren't even a city. We were a regional district. And so that came after the fact. But I would say, first and foremost, with Teresa and I, our heart broke, and we felt it deeply that, boy, without the bride, really being led in a way where is as much as the Spirit can help us with that, we make mistakes along the way, but as long as the Spirit, we're inviting the Spirit, there's something beautiful that we can point to, and that is Jesus. We felt and still feel quite deeply to that. That's what got us here in a nutshell. And I guess that's why we're still here. I guess we're coming into year, I can't believe it, 22. Year 22. So, I think if that wasn't there, I would not be here. I mean, I would probably be bored, if it was just an option. But I think that God really wrecked me in a way. I think I saw amazing grace in my own life personally, and I just thought, man, like, my response can only ever be to really kind of be a part of what it is that I believe he's asking me to be a part of. And so Sunridge has loved us. And so we continue to feel like we're useful. And so until that changes, we're committed to lead and lovingly get that next generation fired up and do some baton passing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's one of the tough things with God is if you're against something, he still has the total capacity to change your heart. I always call it cheating. Like,
yeah,
you think you got one set of cards in your hand, the next thing he just kind of starts changing your heart, and okay, I'm in full war. So
it has to be the heart, because if it's not the heart, then there's a whole bunch of external motivators that I guess are just kind of keep us moving along, and as that wears off, that wears out pretty quickly. I think one of the things that really drives me too is just the fact that it's called the rise of the nuns, and within our province, one of the stats that really bothers me an awful lot, I guess in 1961, Stats Canada came up with 0.5% of the people surveyed would check, I'm not affiliated with any religion. It's the nun box. 0.5%, 1961. There's this number, 41%, that is now being checked in our province, British Columbia. 41% are ticking the nun box. And I think, that's definitely going the wrong way. And I don't know if the bride has really maybe counted on Christ, counted on his Spirit to really reflect his love, to love our city in the way that maybe we should. And I mean, Sunridge, we've like I said, we've made a lot of mistakes, but one thing for sure, boy, we really do want to stay aligned with what it is he's asked. And by his Spirit, I pray that he'd really guide us along the way. But back to your point, has to be the heart. And may God continue to do that tenderizing in us, because that's really where it's, if I don't have a soft heart toward what it is, then I don't even see properly. And so it's a big deal. I think it's really important that we do this right. And so we've got to really keep, as brothers, as pastors, accountable to this too. And stay soft toward the Lord and stay soft toward the nuns so that we can reach some of them as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because it's like if God hasn't got your heart and that calling aligned, and you kind of get looking at old ministry should like this, when it gets tough or when you go for long seasons of difficulty, then you're going to tap out so fast, right? There's been so many things that, man, we didn't see coming. And, God's been faithful through all of it, but, we joked early on, it was so accurately, it's like if God actually revealed everything we'd have to go through, we'd tap out before we even got started. And we would have tapped out 100 times by now. So, it's really just stepping into a place and seeing, I think, with a whole different set of eyes, that like when God tweaks your heart like that. So it's crazy. So I mean, what's kind of like the biggest change maybe that you've seen in the last 22 years kind of in the church in Kelowna, West Kelowna area?
Well, I would say certainly when we came here, there was it felt, at least to me and Teresa, it was very territorial. Churches were very, protective. There's certainly a story before we got here. And that story is different than Kelowna. But the story in West Kelowna, there was a very territorial vibe given. And I did my best to meet with most every pastor that would meet with me before, we went public in that sense. And I learned pretty quickly that there was clear message. You stay over there, and we'll stay over here. Mm-hmm. And I found that really, I don't know what I was expecting. I guess I was expecting camaraderie, and I don't even know if I fully understood, kingdom-mindedness as much as I do today, but I think I expected more of that, even then. And there was so many different sad church stories over here on the west side, churches that were fractured and divisive. And so I understand, what happens when you're all hurt and banged up, you get protective. So that was certainly the story when we came here. And beautifully what we've seen over these years now, though, is a coming together and a real change. I would love to hear from you, though, too, Ryan. What is it that you've kind of walked in? Because there's a couple of decades mm-hmm. that I would say, boy, it started pretty bumpy. And so it feels like where we're at today, in my view, from where we've come, wow, I'm thankful. Yeah. But I'm pretty close to it as well. You coming in from Vancouver more recently, it would be good to know, what do you see? And what is it that you've come to understand? Certainly improvement. I'm sure there's more that could happen in that regard, though.
Yeah, I think what you were experiencing when you came here is kind of indicative of where the church Western was a couple decades ago. I don't think it's purely this area. I don't know to what degree and that kind of thing. But I've grown up in the church, and we didn't really have, we thought good things of other churches, but it was kind of like, that's their thing, that's my thing. So I don't know if that was an expression of how I just kind of grew up versus the lay of the land. But I think that whole idea of like, we just got to grow this thing, and if someone else is benefiting, then we can't, which from a city of over 500,000 people, it's kind of a silly way to think.
Scarcity mindset, right?
Yeah, and I think what can happen is sometimes when you have established churches, there's vintages in that place where like, we've got to be going after people. We've got to be sharing the gospel, because we're not looking for transfer growth. We want to see people added to the kingdom. So there's like this desperation of survival mode if you're looking at just growing a church. But I think that's even the wrong mindset. I think it has to be like that initial heart when you're driving around the city. God's going like, hey, these are my people. These are my kids. And if you get away from that, then it's very easy to get into... we just got to build this thing so well that people come to us, that we're the church that's going to grow. Versus, I think there's more the spirit behind a lot of the change is getting back to that. What are we called to accomplish? Yeah, we want to grow and disciple people who come to faith. But if what God's put on our heart is to share who He is with those who are still far off, then we all know we're so hooped. There's no way that Sunridge is big enough. There's no way Vintage is big enough. Put all the churches we've got together, like you said, you're still praying for mm-hmm. more people to come in. We're not big enough for the task, right? Mm-hmm. So I think when we kind of get aligned back onto why we're here, then we realize, like it's all got to be by God's Spirit, but like we're just so short on the capacity to do that. So I think that's where you start to see churches kind of team together as far as their camaraderie and that. And there's, we'll see where everything goes, but like, how does that look as far as us reaching our community as a body, right? Mm-hmm. I love churches doing their expressions because that reaches different people, but we've walked into a place that I think is much healthier. I think we can still feel some ribbons of the past, but that's mm-hmm. probably more located to specific groups within the community. So we're kind of walking into a part going, we haven't felt necessarily very connected to churches in the past, but that might be more on us as ministers. Now coming to a community where, where we've been welcomed with open arms and, just, hey, how can we help you? How can we see this thing go? So we're definitely much further than what you would have experienced. Mm-hmm. I think our hearts pastor to pastor are aligned for what needs to be accomplished. You know,
And I'm loving that.
Yeah, whether we do it the same way or not, who gives a rip, because then we would probably be reaching one demographic or one cross section of the city. And yeah, I mean, it's been humbling to, you know, we were just talking before we started here, just the level of love and acceptance that we've gotten from you guys. It's been humbling, where it's like literally like, what happens if another guy comes to town? Like, am I going to be able to be this open as to what I've received, right? You know, and then having to start to check myself, you know, ahead of time. So, you know, I think we're in a great place, but I do also feel like, obviously I feel like I'm in the season of beginnings. We you know, just got here 2 years ago, but I feel for the church in West Kelowna in the valley that there's a new season that's being started, and that's partly from talking to some other guys in the area as well. So yeah,
I think if there's anything else I'd say about what's changed over the years, and I think it just, when you just commented on you've been here for 2 years, you know, I think when we walked into what we walked into, we realized pretty quickly that, man, there was somewhat of an unwelcoming feel and a vibe. And what that did to me is it made me, I think I called it a deep conviction, and I gave it this impression that somehow there was Holy Spirit fuel, you know, that I really needed to access in order to have Sunridge be, you know, not even just sustaining, but prevailing in some way. But I think there's a dark side to it too. And I think the dark side for me is, you know, we have an enemy and we have a war, we understand that. But when you somehow think that you're kind of alone, and bring into that, you're somewhat entrepreneurial yourself, bring into that, you've got your red-blooded male, bring into that all of these things, and then you get your ego going, and then you've got arrogance going, and it's like, before you know it, it's like you've almost got this holy crusade piece going off. And I don't think that is really helpful. So I think that I've had to really just admit, like, first of all, Jesus said he'd build his church. I think I would completely agree with that. And then I would build it. I would completely know the verse, Matthew 18:20, and then I would do it myself. And there was something, I think, that he had to kind of work out of me, because it really is. It is his church. But, you know, mingled with that, John 15 says, you know, bearing fruit somehow really gives glory to the Father. And if you bear even more fruit, even more glory. So there's the metrics started to play with me.
It's a tough one.
And so then it's like, man, you know, you're alone, and you're building, and you're working, and you're giving your life for this holy cause. Boy, I tell you what, one of the most important things for me was that I really needed to have a devotional life that recalibrated me, because I'm activistic enough that I get really impatient quickly. I'm also ego strong, so all I know is that I need a lot of amazing grace. And so in leadership, you know, the Lord will prune you, and there's a beautiful work that has to happen within a leader so that the bride can actually really be flourishing. So maybe it's just taken those years so that I finally come to a place where, hopefully, certainly more than where I was, I really want to be completely dependent upon the church planter, Jesus Christ, and that I come under, and I mean that, like, really come under that. I don't know if I always have.
It's tough. Yeah, I definitely have shared this before with other people. I've had seasons where I've done a lot for Christ without Christ.
Yes.
Because it's like you get into that doing of church, and, you know, trying to meet people's expectations of what they think church is supposed to be. And then you're saying, like, the whole metrics thing, that's something that we're still working on, all the different metrics that we want to track, because whatever you track, you're going to grow, and it's going to get your attention. And yeah, you want to have fruit. What's that? It's, you know, like, all these kind of circling questions, because, you know, you can have a lot of people sitting in chairs. It doesn't mean they're connected to the Lord. So Yeah, there's a lot of mind games that definitely go with it, because it's, we always say, like, pray like it depends on the Lord, but work like it depends on you. Like there's a partnership there. But yeah, it's those simple verses, we say all the time, just like stay aligned, which is like, upon you I will build my church, which puts us in the passenger seat for the best ride of our life, but it puts us in the passenger seat for sure. So yeah, and then to think that he's got different stories working out in each body in each church is more mind-blowing. But yeah, I think there's definitely a bright future for what comes next, and hopefully if we rely on him as the church planner, we'll not freak out as much as things start to go, because those details, those are his problems.
My dream is that, as you are Spirit-led, as I am Spirit-led, and what I mean by Spirit-led is like, Jesus, please, give us what it is. Okay, let me back up. I think I'm actually kind of tired of leading the church by best practices. There's an awful lot of best practices. I know that Vintage is a very unique expression of the body of Christ. And so as you're submitted to the Spirit's direction in Vintage, and Mike and Teresa are submitted to the Spirit's, leading in Sunridge, and the other churches as we grow in this, can you imagine? Now we're actually lining up with what it is that Jesus has already said he'd do. He's going to build his bride. He's going to build his church. It's just that I can move so fast on very cool ideas. And very cool ideas have always not led to bearing fruit. Yeah. But I'm a sucker for very cool ideas. So I've learned to really come under and be Spirit-led, and imagine if we would all just really unite around that. What would the Lord do in our city? Yeah. What could really be accomplished if we really truly listen better, obey quicker, and even in our mistakes of doing poor listening, but heartfelt obedience, I think that there's an honoring that God would do. So that's really my dream, that the churches of West Kelowna would listen better and obey quicker, and allow the bride to just find a beautiful expression that this city requires.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that obedience part, even where it's like there's some things I know I'm not good at, or I might not be hearing 100% clear on, but if I'm aware of that, so is God. So let's just, because I can get caught up in that whole like back and forth, overthinking everything versus no, I think this is actually of the Lord, and I don't think I can actually undo His sovereign plan for the city.
Right.
Should I be
it's a pretty tough one to undo?
Yeah. So like God's bigger than even my stupid mistakes, and so that's crazy. So what's kind of like the next season for you guys? Like, is there anything on the radar that you're kind of excited that's going on with your body? You have an amazing community here, and I'll say that. Like the first Sunday we came to visit you guys, it was like this is a one giant family, and that was great. So is there anything that's kind of happening amongst your people, or let's say program wise, that you got coming?
I think one of the things that I really honestly are most excited about is just the movement that's happening with our students. And so they've just returned from Mexico. They do it every year, and it's a house building mission. We partner with an organization called Amore Ministries. We've done that. Well, we did that our first year of marriage, so that's 30 years ago, and we've really tried to carry that through. And so our student leadership has just continued in that way. And so they just returned 3 days ago. And some of the stories that came out of that were just, it's a reflection of what I'm most excited about in Sunridge. And one of the things that they do is they do a devotional theme. And the theme this year was just hearing God, listening to God and obeying, just like we were saying earlier. And some of the beautiful expressions in students. So we're talking 14, 15, 16-year-olds, where they're just, they're led by student leaders and they're modeled to by student leaders, but then these students are actually practicing this in a very normal way. So now they're coming back and they're sharing these stories, and I don't know how to say this nicely, but I think that the day is coming where students are actually going to, in some way, set the pace for the adults. And that's not to say I'm not praying for maturity in adults. It's just to say there's a beautiful freedom that comes with students, and we're seeing this swell happening within Sunridge. It's probably a couple of years in the making. And so I'm trying to fan the flame on our student ministries and just to see that just continue. What's really unique about it is that our youth pastor is a volunteer. So he's a full-time finished carpenter. He's my son-in-law. I love him to pieces. And my daughter, his wife, they just lead a beautiful charge. But even there's limitations for time.
Totally.
And yet there's this swell of God that is taking place. And so it's really shaping our church. I'm excited anytime someone will, really risk listening and obeying. And we're seeing more of that happen within Sunridge. And man, I pray for more of that. Just simple things.
Yeah. I think that's the lasting stuff too, where you're looking for life change, right? And it's not just a matter of running a program or something that fills the building for an hour on whatever night of the week, but rather just seeing God begin to do things in people. So yeah, those trips are great for that. We used to do a ton of them. And same thing, I take a lot of students because I was overseeing student ministries at the time. And anytime you can put a fire in the basement, it's going to move the church.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too, we actually had this, it's funny that we target young families, but our fall, we were seeing people in their 50s and 60s numerically starting to increase. And, and it's just that reminder to people when they can see it in someone else. They're God's not done with you.
You got some gray hair coming through.
I do. I got some here. Toughen up. Yeah.
I think, and that's what's working.
There you go. I put it in there so I can be more appealing to those who are older than me. We're hey, see, I'm almost. But yeah, it's when we don't live in a vacuum. Anytime the Lord starts to do something in someone's life, and hopefully we can see that from church to church, where we can actually celebrate someone's win. When we see stuff going on with you guys, and be this is awesome. Look at God does.
Wouldn't it be something if we could celebrate each other's wins all the time?
Yeah,
all the time.
Yeah,
and I pray for that. I pray for that for you, that there's so many things that you guys are just absolutely bearing fruit in, so that me and this body, we can just celebrate what it is that God is doing in Vintage. Yeah. I love the idea of celebrating the wins that are taking place within Roger and Carrie and Westmount and other churches in West Kelowna. That we would celebrate those things. That would be a huge change from what we came from.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's necessarily a given. I think that's a choice. Whatever the trigger might be, often it's driving by a building. We know that a church is far more than a building, but maybe just a reminder. God, would you just continue to bless that church with what they're trying to do to reach the city, but that we would really just say lots, Ryan, about let's celebrate one another. What a beautiful discipline that would be.
I think it also helps keep us in check on our hearts and that kind of stuff too, right? Yeah. So, Les and I were driving around, and it's kind of some of the same conversations we've been having recently, just about what does it look like to support? So one of them is celebrating. One of them is, when people come to town to start a new expression, that you're excited for that. But same thing, we were just kind of talking, if there's something that we start knocking out of the park, we should just be figuring out how to give that away. Not going, oh, this is our little secret to success in the city, but rather man, if this is going to work for someone else, or if they can take 10% of this thing and modify it for their people and their expression, then let's do that. Because again, it's that, man, if we're going to reach the city, then it can't just be because, we got a movie theater and a couple people can stack in there on a Sunday, right? It's really how do we enable and how do we, again, just start to leverage the creativity that's in a bunch of these churches and the spiritual gifting that's in a bunch of these churches, and then kind of disseminate it. And again, I think that's at least, posturing correctly before the Lord. I don't know if he's going to do stuff with all that. I don't know. We'll see.
What do you mean by posture?
Well, just again, that checking yourself, right? Like again, it's very easy to do something and have pride well up because like you hit a couple of your metrics, right?
Yeah.
But if you find that magic bullet and then you take it out of your gun and put it in somebody else's, then it's about what he's trying to accomplish, not the expression of how you're trying to see that walkout. So, is there what would you say is kind of the stickler? So you've seen a lot of great things change in the community over 22 years. As far as the church is concerned, is there kind of like something that's still a bit of a hinge point of issue?
Well, I think the reality of every city, there's something that one would probably have to pay attention to. And there's a hinge point for sure, a sticking point. We live in a pretty cool city. Like we live in a beautiful city. We live in what some consider one of the wealthier cities. Put all those things together, sadly, it's easy to conclude that you really don't need saving. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you don't need a savior. Conclusion, you really don't need God. So here we are, not trying to just band together saints. We're actually here to reach the nuns. Mm-hmm. We are trying to point to Jesus in such a way that there's a softening of the heart and a yielding to the Lordship and a realigning their whole life. Now, if you're in a place where it's packaged pretty good, for the most part, people, they're doing life the way they want to do it recreationally, with every toy and event that they want to do. Where does God fit in that? I'd have to confess that's been one of the hardest parts of planting and leading a church. That is bent on leading people to become passionate, committed followers of Christ. Now, again, we're not just banding together believers. We're really trying to reach those that are confused and those that do not know that they even need God. Man, that's a hinge point. And I think that the prayer that it requires, the unity between church leaders that it requires, and I'd say this, we have got to absolutely lose and crush the mentality of the building of our little empire church. Because if we can't move from that, there's no way we're going to touch our city. It's not until we have a kingdom view, and when we fall into empire-like view, we confess it as sin. And we repent and we say, no, I'm going to hold that thought captive because that's not right. And we move back to a kingdom mindset. And, we're probably going to go back and forth on this thing, but we know what's right. Mm-hmm. And what's right is a kingdom mindset. So the hinge point is, how are we going to love our city the way we're called to? How are we going to love our city in such a way that Jesus is made famous, that there's something where people can, in the middle of their maybe put together lives, they can still maybe be awakened to the fact that, just a second, maybe I am missing something. That's a work of God. Yeah. And maybe it's obviously through our friendships that we're making with people, but boy, I love our city, but it's a challenging one to easily say, you need God, and to have them say, I don't think so.
Yeah. I think it's one of those interesting things because it's so affluent, but if you look at the stats that are plaguing it, it's very sick. So you have not just drug use, but a massive amount of OD. So people are like going heavy into that. You have, even with kids, adults, like anxiety, depression, like crazy amount of people who are in a place where it's beautiful, who have everything, who really don't know need, and yet I think are very needy. And I always hear about it for, Forbes magazine or whatever, talk to multi-billionaire, are you happy? Well, if I just had another billion or two. Obviously to a lesser degree, I think we have a city that runs that line of we should have everything, but marriages are failing here faster than anywhere else in the province. You see families falling apart. So it's like nice and glossy, and then there's just a whole lot of this isn't working. And I think this is, and I have not figured this out yet, maybe we can collaborate on it, is I think the church has come a long way in its presentation of the gospel of, little cliff, it's you, God, and down here was like hell and sin and all this stuff, and then they kind of reframed it over a couple decades.
I was going to use that on Sunday. Are you saying I shouldn't be?
No, it's all right. That's A. B is at least moving it to a relational. There's a chasm in the relationship, right? And part of that's just because we're more sensitive. By sensitive, I mean pansy. So we had to kind of change the way that we talk about those things. So now there's a gulf. We're not so focused on the sin, but rather what sin has created that. But what I don't think we've done, and I think that's right. Like there is grace. We have to cheat.
Did you say pansy? Yeah. You did, didn't you?
Yeah.
Are we editing this, or are we going to go?
No, that's good.
That's good.
If you hear what I say on a Sunday, that's nothing. But yeah, so I think what's happened is we've taught a true and necessary, I think, totally faith defining, especially compared to other worldviews, like this grace notion. But I don't know if we've really come to a place of teaching desire.
Yeah.
And speaking to desire, because we are created to be creatures of desire, and as soon as our eyes, it's that misplaced love. Yeah. So it's going from where it's supposed to be to somewhere it's not, and ultimately that's going to fail because it's meant to point you to Creator, not to itself. So I've struggled with that for probably 5-6 years now. Like, how do you speak to desire? Because that's a natural aspect, even for people who have come to faith, to see that their heart sways to the Lord versus being many people in the Western church that puts Jesus in their back pocket and still lives like a capitalistic Westerner, same goals and fears and desires. So it's definitely where the city's at, though. Yeah,
I've been developing a friendship with a guy at gym I go to, and so we were. It's been a couple of years in the making, and so we were doing lunch one day, and he's just a real great guy. He's just a good, funny guy. And we're doing lunch, and so he looks across the table at me and he says, "So you ready for Sunday? And you got it all mapped out?" And he says it like this. I started laughing over my burger. I was just thinking, yeah, pretty much. He says, "You probably, Wednesday, maybe Thursday, you get some ideas and just kind of pitch them out there on Sunday." And it's a little different than that. And he says, "Well, what are you gonna say?" And it just so happened that Sunday really was touching on this whole thing of, how is it that you help somebody who doesn't think they need God to see that they actually need God? And I took advantage of that, and I just really kind of went for it. And he was dialing in, he was listening, and he says, "Oh, that's pretty good. That's what you're going to say?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "What do you think about that?" He says, "Well, yeah." I says, I don't need God, but clearly, I guess, you think, and I respect that. He says, "I respect that you think people do need God." And I said, "Okay, well, Smarty, what do you think's going to happen?" Because I said at one point, we do know, don't we, that we're going to die. It still hovers around 100%. We'll die. And he says, "You're going to die too, and you're going to have, I believe, you're going to have a very important meeting. And in that meeting, you're going to stand before God. How do you think that meeting's going to be?" First of all, do you believe that there's, probably going to be a meeting? Okay.
That's true.
How is that meeting going to go for you? How are you going to dialogue with a holy God and you? And by the way, I know you pretty well, and I know what you're prone to. So, and this is his answer was classic. And he just says, "Well, I just know, that I'm a pretty good guy. And, there's the scale. And I'm going to have more things that I've done well. In fact, this is the words I love. He says, "Mike, I'm an A- guy. I'm not even a C+. That's average. I'm actually an A- guy. I saw him yesterday. He yells across to me. He says, 'I'm still an A- guy.'" And it is code for that conversation.
Yeah.
And I love getting to know different guys, and I love getting to know different guys in a lot of different contexts. This happens to be more in athletics, but I run into that a lot. They may not say it like that, but that's their core belief. And somehow through friendship and through the Holy Spirit using maybe words that I could use, I'm praying, I'm hoping, I'm counting on somehow there'd be some way to soften their heart, they'd be open to considering maybe they do need God. That is one of the biggest challenges I think we're facing, leading a church in a city that on the outside at least is beautiful.
Crazy. Yeah, well, we'll have to keep just praying for those divine appointments, those relationships. And I think one of the key things there you're touching on as well, maybe inadvertently, is just the longevity of the relationship.
Yeah, it's been 2 years I've probably been working with getting to know him.
So, I mean,
it doesn't happen fast.
No. If it does, celebrate it and settle in for a bunch of long.
Yes.
That, and just I think just getting to be a people who are okay being in relationships and having people to table that may never come to know the Lord. But to let that rest on him. He's building a church, and we always say love without an agenda. Just be present, and you don't know. God's a way better storyteller than we are. I'm sure through your journey, life, even pre this, to see just the way he walks things out is you can't write a better story. So, well, man, we just thank you for taking some time and hosting us in your church, and we'll be praying for you guys for sure for the next season ahead and for your student ministries, and just for all of us to have things that are going on in people's lives being noticed by the church. And I think the church really just stepping up and going, oh, by the way, scripturally our faith's not just for ourselves, but it's a calling to the ministry that the Father's at. So thank you so much again. Looking forward to the years ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much for taking the time and for you and Noah to be able to just make all this beautifully come together. Your invitation and your efforts and your works. And I really pray that God really blesses the chance for us to capture these conversations, pretty unedited, pretty just kind of going where it needs to go. And so in a way, there's things I've shared that I didn't even know I would, but you're good at pulling some of those stories out. So thank you very much, and bless your leadership here in our city.
Thanks, Dan.